Here are the updated pros and cons of living in Atlanta, Georgia. One of the newest pros of living here is the new Centennial Yards that they are working on right by the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This is like a mixed-use facility that they are currently building. It was for the last few decades like a train yard that was kind of armpit of Atlanta that was really not developed for anything, and it was like nobody went there. But they are now really like revitalizing that whole area right there in front of Mercedes-Benz Stadium to be this kind of mixed-use facility, office spaces, residential spaces. I'm sure lots of commercial spaces as well. Probably similar to what like they have going on at the Battery by the Atlanta Braves Stadium, but this time by the Atlanta Falcons Stadium. And so it's not necessarily a sports thing. It's just that they have this kind of like attraction space that they're trying to improve this part of the city of Atlanta. Many people here in Atlanta are very excited about this. They broke ground in 2024 and they're expected to finish sometime around 2026 or 2027, but no doubt that all of this will improve land values and home values in the area and provide lots of new things to do in that area. What's up, y'all? My name is Victor with Atlanta Suburban Living. We put out videos every week about what it's like to live in Atlanta and the suburbs around Atlanta. Another big pro is the amount of outdoor space that there is here in Atlanta, but one of the new things that they have going on is the recent completion of parts of the Beltline. The Beltline is one of these walking trails that goes around like the entire city of Atlanta. You can often find people walking there, jogging, riding scooters or one wheels or whatever all around this Beltline, and it goes through things like Ponce City Market, a lot of commercial spaces, and so it really provides easy access and easy walkability to the residents of Atlanta. But just this past year, or maybe coming up, they've got the completion of the West Side Trail and the South Side Trail, kind of like in the southeast part of that loop, is kind of recently been completed. And so this is another one that very many people are excited about. In fact, if you're interested, I've got a link for the entire like Beltline trail loop and like all of the different segments of the trail. I'll put it in the description so you can get a closer look at the different parts of the Beltline. Another big pro that is kind of a recent thing here in Atlanta is that home prices are finally like stabilizing or even coming down in some parts of Metro Atlanta. So this new market that we're in of like a lot less buyers and a lot of sellers means that we're finally in a buyer's market. If you're thinking about buying a home in Atlanta, feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. Thank you so much to everybody who has reached out. I'm always happy to help. But it's great news to see that finally we're seeing these home prices coming down instead of just like going up and up and up, which it has been doing for the last few years. And so buyers are getting deals on homes. Buyers are getting their closing costs paid for. It's much easier to buy a home now than it has been in the last few years. And so this is a great thing about moving to Atlanta, especially if you're looking for that lower cost of living. You can certainly find a deal here in Atlanta. Another pro of living here is the city centers that we see in the different suburbs of Atlanta. So when I mean city centers, I'm talking about like not necessarily the city of Atlanta, but the suburbs around Atlanta. So like the city of Marietta and Alpharetta and Holly Springs, Johns Creek. These are all parts of the Metro Atlanta area where you have a lot more residential and people tend to live in these areas and then maybe drive to Atlanta for work. But these kind of suburbs have traditionally not really had a lot of easy walkability, or you're not going to like live in a part of Holly Springs and then be able to walk to all of the things because it's a suburban area. You know, you have a bunch of neighborhoods and then you have the commercial areas outside of the neighborhood, maybe a 5 to 10 minute drive to get to a grocery store or to get to shopping. But what we see here in Metro Atlanta very often is the city center of these suburbs. So like Marietta Square or downtown Marietta or downtown Alpharetta, they have these city centers, and there have recently been some new cities or new suburbs that are finally developing their own city centers. So Holly Springs is one that is currently in the middle of building one of those city centers. Johns Creek finally is doing their city center and kind of revitalizing that. Also, another one would be like the city of Powder Springs. They have just recently started, actually they're kind of coming to an end now at Powder Springs. They're finishing up this downtown area. They've got Thurman Park and the amphitheater theater. And so they're doing a lot of work there as well. And so all of these kinds of city centers make it far easier to be able to have that walkability and walk to the stores and walk to the shops and restaurants and all those things instead of being super car dependent when you live in the suburbs. Another big pro of living here is that while we have always had a very good job market, lots of employers here in Metro Atlanta, in the last couple years, what we're seeing is a lot of job openings in these industries that are growing even more so than other industries. So like in the last few years, there are lots of big businesses that have been moving here to Metro Atlanta to get away from the higher cost of running the business in other states, like maybe California or New York or Florida. And so you have a lot of these businesses starting to move here to Atlanta. So now we have lots of job openings in these growing industries like tech and healthcare, logistics, media, film industry. All of these industries are growing very quickly here in Metro Atlanta. And then a couple other big pros here in Atlanta, we're seeing finally lots of home builders, home owners remodeling older homes. And so instead of these like 60s and 70s homes that haven't been remodeled in decades, we're finally seeing a lot of companies come in and remodel these homes so that we have newer, fresher looking homes, but they have that character from the 60s and 70s. And then I'd say another big one is the amount of cultural diversity that we're seeing here in Atlanta, especially as more and more people are moving here to Metro Atlanta. We're seeing much more diverse cultures and diverse races. And this is obviously something that's great and super important to me and my wife. And we love seeing that amount of diversity here in Atlanta. And while Atlanta has been a very racially diverse area for the last couple decades, maybe 1 or 2 decades, it is growing even more so and becoming even more diverse. Okay, now for some downsides of living in Atlanta. And it's super important, of course, if you're planning on moving to Atlanta, you really want to know what the good and the bad is. No city is perfect. No state, no part of the country is perfect. And so, of course, Atlanta has its good and its bad, but you really want to weigh your options and weigh what the good and the bad is if you plan on moving here. And so one of the downsides here in Metro Atlanta that we have been seeing in the last couple years is the amount of corporate investors buying real estate. And so this is kind of good for some reason, like they do a lot of remodeling of homes, but it's also bad because they turn these homes into rental homes. And so instead of people being able to buy these homes, we have corporate investors buying thousands of homes here in Metro Atlanta, which raises the home prices, but they're also turning them into rentals. And so it makes it a lot more difficult to be able to buy these homes, obviously. Hopefully with the market starting to turn and becoming more of a buyer's market, it's possible that these corporate investors will start to sell some of these homes. I'll certainly keep you updated. Another big one is the aging infrastructure here in Atlanta. It's always been kind of dicey, but as we get more and more new people moving here to Metro Atlanta, which is great and it's great for the city, the infrastructure here is struggling. And I wouldn't say that the city or even the cities around Atlanta, they don't really do a great job of keeping up with the influx of population. And so some of these cities, especially some of these older cities like Vinings or Sandy Springs, Norcross, Dunwoody, they don't do a great job with infrastructure. So you have roads with potholes or you have power lines that look like they're about to fall over. And so definitely an issue here in Metro Atlanta that is increasing. Another downside of living here is that while home prices have finally stabilized, they have stabilized to a point where they're still very expensive. And so no longer is it easy to find affordable homes close to Atlanta. And so it's really the suburbs that are far from Atlanta that are the most affordable. And so you have cities like Dallas or Powder Springs where you can find $300,000 and $400,000 homes, but it's like an hour drive to Atlanta. Or Canton is another one. Cumming is another one. In these suburbs, you can finally find affordable homes, but it's like a long ass drive to get to Atlanta from those suburbs. And so it makes it a difficult decision. Like you want to find the affordable homes, but you also work in Atlanta. And is it worth moving an hour away from Atlanta to find the affordable homes if you got to sit in traffic and the long commute to Atlanta? This is a common question that I have many people asking me about. Is it worth it to live super far to find the affordable homes if you got a long drive to work? And then another con one is kind of one that we talk about a lot, but this is getting worse, is the traffic, the rush hour traffic here in Metro Atlanta. While more people are moving here, and this is great, one of those downsides is the amount of rush hour traffic. And so really the best way to get around this traffic or to avoid this kind of traffic issue is to live in an area that's close to work, or, you don't have to live in Marietta and drive to Atlanta. You can live in Marietta and there are plenty of employers in the city of Marietta. Likewise, you can live in Dallas, Georgia. Again, you don't have to drive all the way to Atlanta. You can live in Dallas and work in Marietta. Or maybe you live in Alpharetta and work in Alpharetta. These suburbs, Marietta, Alpharetta, Norcross, Lawrenceville, they all have many employers. And so very often you don't have to go all the way to Atlanta. You can go to one of these other big cities for work. So there's definitely a lot of suburbs around Atlanta. There's actually arguably like 100 suburbs, city suburbs around Atlanta. And so it's very often, it's difficult to know like which one is the right one for me. And so if you have any questions, of course, you can always call, text, or email me. But another thing you can do is watch my video about the top 5 suburbs of Metro Atlanta, where I outlined those specific suburbs and why they are the best ones. You can check it out right here. I'll see you in the next one.